Rats at chess.com, here to continue my video series of the correspondence team match between my video lessons group and the team CARPE DIEM. This was played on board 61. We have about a high 1800, high 1700 rating advantage. Our man is TomHaegin. And PAFloryn timed out in both games, got two bad positions and gave up. You know, this happens. I sympathize with anyone that this happens to. You want to get the game over, but look at it this way: if he had vacation time and used that up, he's not going to do that on another player, okay? And it's just we want to get the game over, we just have to be patient and wait for it. That's all I can really say. There's no penalty against it. I think they get it goes on their record that they have a certain percentage of timeouts that might disqualify them from some events, or a individual group, if they monitor their members, could say, hey, you're timing out in games, we don't want you. Remove them from the team. You know. But anyway, let's have a look. Come on, move. There it did. Okay. So we have the Scotch game, and here White chooses a sideline. It's not the main and most common line. I don't know how much opening theory White knows, or White bothers to look up. When you see the second game, you'll think maybe he didn't know any. But one thing I say in my video lessons program: if all else fails, develop a piece. Okay, you can protect the knight by developing your bishop to e6, e3, and Black doesn't want to take twice on d4. That'll just develop the White queen into a nice centralized position. Probably don't want to take. That's going to give Black the option to take back with his b pawn and be able to break with an eventual d5. So c3 is his move, and it also takes that square away from the knight. And Black follows common sense, develops his pieces. This is what you want to do. Now there's a threat on this pawn, and White makes a pin and castles. And here at this point, Black falls into a little trick, or White falls into a little trick rather. I'm dyslexic. I always get White and Black mixed up. Probably what White needs to play is capture on f6. We'll see what goes wrong. We'll come back and look at this in a little bit when we're done with the game. We'll look at that possibility. Black plays rook e8 and threatens to take on e4. Now, it's not too late for White to save this game, maybe make it playable, but he's probably going to have to jettison a pawn and castle, and he doesn't. Certainly he didn't see what was happening coming. It's not that easy to see. He plays knight d2, and that protects the pawn, because clearly Black can't take the pawn on e4 with his rook. White will just take it and with his knight. And then if you take the knight, you lose your queen. Conversely, White says, well, Black can't take the pawn with his knight because then I take his queen. But if you're familiar with tactics of the Petrov defense, one of the beginner traps people fall into, it basically sets the same up. It has the same threat. And Black surprises White with knight takes e4. And, so often we shut off our analysis. We say somebody can't do that move and slam the door shut and don't look any further. But if you look, this is very similar to what White does in the Petrov defense when both sides take the pawn on e4 back to back. White plays queen e2, and Black retreats his knight and loses his queen. So here, White just goes and gobbles the queen. There's really nothing better. And now Black picks up a second pawn with check, discovered check, and White has to give the queen back. It's that simple. And Black takes the queen. Now let's take a look here. Both sides have 4 minor pieces. Both sides have a minor piece hanging. Both sides have a pawn hanging. In this case, the pawn on b2 and the pawn on c7. So what's White going to do? If he takes on, let's see, let's take a look at bishop c7. What does Black do here? Well, he's got probably a lot of happy choices here, if we think about it. He could even take this pawn on f2, right? And that attacks a rook and gets ready to, if anything, save the knight. Maybe chase this bishop off this diagonal and somehow get a knight d3 check in. I mean, the possibilities are endless. Well, white opts to just liquidate the offending knight that's infesting his position, forcing black to take back, and black is winning. Move 12, dead one game, two clear pawns ahead, and white has no compensation for it. And white castles, and black just starts improving his position. Let's reduce the mobility of your bishop, and prepares to develop his bishop. So really, white plays a few more moves. G6, well, it just keeps white pieces out of here. It weakens the black king side a little bit, but there's nothing white has on the board to exploit it. So they just kind of playing moves back and forth, and black's happy to trade, and brings his king up. He doesn't mind if white penetrates with the rook. He'll just chase it out. So white self-destructs here promptly and attacks the bishop, and now unprotects his pawn on a5, and black collects it. And it was at this point that white timed out of both games. Now let's come back to h6. What black or white needs to do is take this. Okay, this eliminates the threat on e4, but there's a new threat looming, and it's on d4. White doesn't have control of d4. Black does. You don't have time to play knight takes knight. So what are you going to do here? Well, you're going to have to play bishop takes. Okay, now you're giving up both bishops, but maybe this was white's best choice. Let's go ahead and take with the b pawn, so we can play d5. But at least you see white's getting castled. But this has to be a fine position for black, simply because the board is opening up, and the bishops will love to have some scope in an open position. So this position is very favorable to black. White doesn't have time for knight here. He's going to drop a pawn back immediately. So that was probably the best white could have done. Okay, let's switch to the other game. I'll insert the PGN. Rarely starts it on move 1. We'll see what starts this time. See, move 7. Just odd. Why does it do that? Version 3, please come help us. Okay, so what happens here? I mentioned in the last game. I don't know how much opening theory black knows, because his next move caught me certainly by surprise. Bishop e6. This is a move that you really want to avoid. The point is it blocks your e-pawn, and even though this bishop could fianchetto, it's normal for black in a Slav defense to have his pawn structure as I'm showing, and this bishop will be a useful piece. It has a whole diagonal to control. It usually ends up on e7, although it might on d6. And just get your pieces developed and call it a game of chess. So this just seems like black's attempting to win a pawn. A one-move threat easily dealt with. So white takes care of that. And black's game is just going to self-destruct here. And what's interesting is white doesn't really do anything magical. He does come up with a clever move or two, as we'll see. But over the next several moves, white does absolutely nothing magical. He just does what I always advocate, develop his pieces. Okay? Whereas black doesn't develop his. And watch how black's going to fall behind in development. I think it's very instructive here. Okay, both sides have one minor piece out. So even though this bishop is misplaced, development's even. Okay, white brings out a piece, black brings out a piece. And now white brings out a piece. So white's got the advantage of the first move. Now, black decides his bishop doesn't belong on e6. He needs to move his e-pawn. And probably what he should do is admit his mistake that it never belonged here in the first place and just put it on g4 and lose a tempo. It'll be essentially a tempo and a half behind. White will always be a tempo ahead or 2 tempos depending on whose move it is. But instead, black plays f6. Now this creates problems. The first problem is his plan is to put the bishop on f7. Well, that took 2 moves to find a better square for the bishop. Okay? So instead of taking one move by admitting his mistake and putting it on g4, or maybe even f5, he's going to put it on f7. The other reason, he's taking f6 away from his knight. This knight doesn't have a useful square to go to. White may double up the black pawns if he goes to h6. So White just does what he's supposed to do, develop. Now, once again, black just starts messing this game up. He plays one of these moves that I've been talking about in many videos. It's something that apparently has been developed by players who learn chess on the internet. They don't like bishops and knights coming to these, in descriptive notation we call them the knight 5 squares. I'm trying to color them in. Man, this just won't work. There, hey, look, I got it. Come on. G5, G5. Come on, G5. There it is. So black plays A6, falling further behind in development. And this also creates, even though it keeps white out of B5, I promise you one thing. White didn't want to go to B5. But I'll tell you another thing, weaken B6, and white's soon going to want to go to B6. Now, you might ask, why doesn't white want to go to B5? It threatens a fork. Okay, fine. Let's see, where are we? Let's get A6 played. Okay, well, actually, we don't save that. Let's just do what black was trying to do, bishop F7. Let's follow through with the plan. Now, white plays knight B5, right? Okay. Yeah, look, you're threatening a fork. Well, it's easily dealt with. Rook C8. Now black has succeeded in developing his rook. He needs to develop that rook at some point. Does white want to check here? No, he's going to have a losing game. Black will just pick up 2 pieces for the rook. And black has a strategically winning game now. Okay? So that goes to B5. Rook C8. And black is fine. This knight is not doing anything here. Okay? Nothing. There was no need to fear this knight going there. Does white want to put his bishop there? No. Okay. Let's if you don't want to have this double pawn, just develop your rook. We talked about that already, right? Just develop your rook. Or get ready to develop. Let him take. Okay? Let him stop and take. Now, black's ready to play C5 at an opportune time. Well, maybe white can stop it, but not too much worry. Eventually, black can get C5 in. But even if he doesn't want that, he can just, as I say, fall back on Rook C8. Whoop, back this up. He can just fall back on Rook C8, developing a rook, which is a piece that needs to be developed, and happily take back if white takes. So white doesn't want to play bishop B5 and take the knight. He doesn't want to play knight B5. So you've just given white a free move. So again, white doesn't do anything magical. He just develops. And now let's see. How many tempos is black behind? White has 4 pieces developed. Black has 2. So white's up 2 tempos. And if black develops a piece this move, he's down 1 tempo. So he's down a tempo and a half. Let's keep counting. He just backed up his bishop. So he didn't gain anything. But at least he's getting ready to develop this bishop. Okay. So white castles. Now, how many tempos is white ahead? 3. 3 tempos, or 2.5, because it's black's move. So black plays E6. He's got to play that if he's going to free his bishop, but it didn't develop a piece. It's just prepared to develop a piece. How many tempos was white ahead? He had 4 minor pieces developed and castled, 5 developing moves versus 2. He was 3 tempos up. Now he's going 4 tempos up. That's a lot of tempos. If white could be down a pawn and have compensation according to the theory. So, the pawn is worth 3 tempos. That's what the masters have told us since before I was born. Okay, before my father was born. Maybe before my grandfather was born. He was born in 1905. Okay, so queen d7. Now, tempo-wise, white's got 5 pieces developed and castled. Black has 3 pieces developed. And black's not even close to getting castled. You can castle from the beginning of the game in as quickly as 4 moves. Black still needs 3 moves to get castled. He's finally got his bishop clear, but he still needs 3 moves from castling. He doesn't want to castle queenside. He's castling right into an avalanche. White's pieces are all pointed at the queenside. So because of black's weakness of A6, which white decides to immediately try to exploit it. White didn't do anything special. He looked there and said, hey, I can threaten a fork. And the reason he can threaten a fork is that pawn is on A6. That's why. No other reason. If that pawn was on A7, white wouldn't play knight A4. Black wouldn't have to deal with a threat. But at least black develops a piece. Okay, gets his rook out of danger. And white just inserts his knight in with tempo. Now look at the poor queen. Can't go diagonally back. Can't go to the queen side. Can't go straight forward. All those squares are under control. So where does she go? That leaves e7. Now black was only 3 moves away from castling. Now he's 4. The queen still has to come out, so the bishop can come out, so the knight can come out, so he can get castled. How many tempos is white ahead now? Let's see. He's developed 5 pieces and castled. Black has developed 3 pieces, 4 pieces, and not castled. White's still way ahead. Okay, so white develops another rook. And I might have put the A rook here, but it turns out this is the correct one. So black's position is desperate, to say the least. He's hanging on by a small thread, and he now proceeds to make the mistake that hastens his defeat. It's a common mistake that players make when they're behind in development. It's one that you want to induce when you're ahead in development. What you want to do when you're ahead in development like this is you want to open up the position. Because if the position opens up, new files, new diagonals, new ranks open up that your pieces are going to be able to use far more likely than your opponent will. And as a result, you get you're able to make threats, you're able to start an attack, and with proper play, you can even find a forced win. So black opens up the game for that white can use. And white so far ahead in development, he now makes his one little special move that I said. He didn't do anything. He hadn't done anything special except develop and threaten a knight fork and drive the black queen to a bad square. So here white comes up with a very creative and clever move. Maybe you can find it. Pause the video. Okay, you've returned. Here it is. White so far ahead in development, he can sacrifice the exchange here. And black needs to take back, and white immediately gets a pawn compensation. And look how the board is opening up. The center is vanishing. There's just 2 more pawns to get rid of, and that black king is looking awful frisky. Okay, as to where in other words, it's looking where it's gonna get in trouble. Okay, and by frisky I mean he's gonna be jumping around the board, dodging white checks and threats. So black still needs to get castled, and he tries to head that direction and offers a queen trade. And he figures maybe if I get rid of the queens, I won't get checkmated. Well, white doesn't care about the queens. He doesn't need the queens to win this game. He just goes and makes his own fork. Black captures, white takes back. Now, white has 6 pawns, black has 4. White's already won 2 pawns. He's given up the exchange, but he's already got 2 pawns for it. He had 1. The pawn on a6 is loose. The rook on d8 is loose. Black needs to get castled. Black can't save the exchange. He can't save his rook on d8. What 2 moves need to be played to get castled? Well, bishop e7 and knight f6, and maybe or maybe not in a particular order. Okay, so what does black play? h6. It's basically saying, go ahead, white, move twice. And white just doesn't even bother about taking the rook. He just increases the pressure. Now he's threatening to capture it flat out. And black gets nothing for it. So he saves his rook. And then white looks at this and says, gee, I'm going to take this pawn. Now your back rank is weak. And here's black still 2 moves from castling. And at this point, black timed out, but his position is hopeless. White has immediate mate threats. Okay, let's try g5 just to show you. Check. Whoops, only 1 legal move, and that's mate. So what can black do to defend this? Well, the answer is not much. You got to clear a square for the king. Let's try bishop h5. Okay, well, check. Check. Where are you going to go with the king? You can't protect the bishop on f8 and the rook on d7. They're both loose. Where's this king go? He's going to get checked again. Essentially, game is over. White's just winning too much material. And there's probably a better move than that. Probably better lines available for White than this. So what defeated Black here? His rook pawn moves certainly didn't help. A6 proved to be a fatal blunder, and the reasons why these rook pawn moves, they keep showing up. Why they're bad, they keep showing up. This is yet another one of them. And what can I say? Other than well played, TomHaegin, and better luck to PAFloryn next time. I thank everyone for watching this video series. There'll be plenty more coming, and thanks for your time. Take care.